Hi. Welcome to SIA's overview of the South Island Child and Family Law with Sarah and Erica. My name is Erica, if you could not already tell from my hand gestures, and I am of settler ancestry from Slovenia, Norway, and Ireland, and have been living out here on the Lekwungen and Kucinich territories for the past 10 or so years. I really also just want to acknowledge the relationships that I've built within the Kucinich communities, particularly with their young people and families and communities and elders who really hold me accountable in the work that I'm doing today. And I'm just really grateful for their ongoing love and support and teachings.
My name is Sarah Leggett. I'm Simshan on my dad's side, as well as Scottish and Norwegian on that side. On my mom's side, I'm from Sartlet First Nation. My mom attended day school there. And through her paternal side, I have ties to the Kamloops area. I am a policy analyst at South Island Indigenous Authority. My background is in social work. I was a social worker, and I'm currently studying a master's of social work right now. I'm grateful to be here with Erica.
Woohoo! And really, this video, what we're hoping to do, as we said in the title, is go a little bit more in depth on the South Island Child and Family Law that SIA has been drafting through decades of community engagement that's been done with the South Island nations. As we all know, the South Island nations never relinquished their inherent right to care for their own children and families. So, really, this law is this next stage of the journey in reasserting that inherent right to have a law for these nations to care for their own community members and folks living on their territory in a way rooted in the teachings of the nations and the land. So we are excited to show this. We're a bit nervous, but bear with us. Today we are going to be specifically looking at the preamble of the law as well as the definitions in our law.
Thank you.
Alrighty, so for the first section of the law, after the table of contents, is our preamble. So a preamble in a law is not actually legally binding, but it really is setting the foundation for the rest of the law and how it is read and how it is felt and how it is interpreted. And so our preamble really tells the story of how the nations on the South Island got to this point. It really states clearly that the member nations have never relinquished their inherent right to care for their own children and families, and that they are best positioned to care for their children and families. And that healing for Indigenous peoples on these territories stems from being connected to who they are and where they belong, and being cared for under an Indigenous law. And we also, in our preamble, incorporate some of the guiding, just like those really foundational pieces that have been guiding this work since the very beginning. Some phrases that we have in here are just our children are gifts from the Creator, our children are sacred, our children are loved and valued, and a couple more. And really just emphasizing this is why we're here. The preamble also commits and kind of sets the stage for the new direction that the member nations are going in, with the federal and provincial governments saying and stating their commitment and expectation that those two levels of government will be working with them on a nation to nation basis to implement their law in the ways that the member nations need it to be implemented. So overall, that's our preamble. Of all the pieces in our law, this is kind of the nicest piece to read because it's in more plain language with less legal language, and definitely give it a read if you haven't. It's really nice.
Okay, hello everyone. So for this part of the presentation, we are going to go over definitions because, as you know, in our law we have to have definitions. So we want to take the opportunity just to go over a few, and then we'll dive more into more explanation. So our first definition here is child. So a child is a child or youth that is 19 and under is a registered member of a member nation or somebody that is connected with one of the member nations or is an Indigenous guest.
Mhm. All right, next definition we have is child and family advocates. This is a role that in future videos we will be exploring in a bit more depth, but really these are, they're taking a kind of like a super social worker role within our nations, but really their role is empowering and supporting families, and supporting and empowering families to lead processes in relation to their own families. And so, as you can see in our definition, they're working with families to ensure child safety. They're also that check and balance when families might be struggling to meet the safety needs of their children. And so, there are some, they're really kind of that professional, what's it called when you, safety net, the professional safety net to ensure that while families are really leading the processes, if there's cases where there's imminent risk and families aren't able to resolve issues, the child and family advocate is really there to make sure that the child remains safe. There will be child and family advocates in each one of our nations and within our urban guest community. And yeah, so it's a really big role under our law and it's a new role. So this is, there's no parallel necessarily within the current system and something we're really excited about. Alrighty, and now we have a child plan. You can see that this is a very small definition, and it's something that we go into far more depth later on in the law. But essentially, a child plan is a document created for each child under the age of 12 within the South Island. It's intended to be created by a child's family and extended family networks in whatever way that means for that child and for their family. It's about bringing families together to plan for their children in a proactive and strength-based way to ensure, yeah, just like if there's ever a need for planning to occur, people are identified, significant relations are identified, and to have something to ensure that family is the first response in all cases. And so these child plans are really trying to put family at the forefront for parents to identify those relationships around their child. The intention with these child plans are for them to be secured or to be stored really securely on a SIA server, to only be accessed in situations when they are required. So it would be a private document that would be updated regularly by the family, and there are supports within our future system to support families in filling out these kind of child plans. But to learn more, stay tuned to one of our later videos.
So the next definition we want to go over is the child safety team. So the child safety team responds to and assesses any child safety reports that come into the team. They don't do any removals. They create reports. They just assess the situation, and with that information, they provide it to the family and the CFA, and they take the reins from there to develop a plan. The purpose of the child safety team is we needed a team to take on the means of assessing child safety as an alternative to having MCFD do so. So the next definition we'll go over is community. So we provided a really broad definition to community. What we mean by community is that it can be who people identify as their community. So it can be through family relation, it can be where they live, it can be through marriage, it can be where they're registered. But what does community mean to them? We allow the family and the person, the people, to define that for themselves. So we want to acknowledge that within the law.
So a coordination agreement is an agreement that Indigenous governing bodies, so SIA is an Indigenous governing body, which we will explain a little bit later, enters into with the federal and provincial government to coordinate the transfer and the transfer of services and funding to an Indigenous governing body to care for their citizens and members and those covered by their law. And so we haven't entered into a coordination agreement yet, but we will be to really be fine tuning those details with the federal and provincial governments.
So our next definition is council. So council in our law can refer to chief and council or whatever governance structure a nation has.
All right, so a child under this law includes a youth and means an individual under the age of 19 years old. And so a child is a registered member to a member nation, they're connected to a member nation in some way, or is an Indigenous guest. A lot of these terms we're going to talk about later in the presentation, but that is our definition of a child.
So this next definition is Council of Indigenous Guests. What the Council of Indigenous Guests is it is a representation of Indigenous guests on these territories. This was important to the nations and to ensure that there was representation of Indigenous guest voice within our law
And governance structure.
Yeah. Our next definition is elder. Our community members have identified elder as not just an old person. It's someone that carries wisdom, teachings, culture. They've been identified by the community as knowledge keepers.
So that definition of elder is important because part of our governance structure is an elders council. And so the elders council is made up of elders. And so that was the definition that Sarah gave us before, appointed by our member nations and the Council of Indigenous Guests to sit on that council. They act largely as an advisory body, and an elder will sit on our other governance councils as well. But really trying to raise up our elders' voices and understand the role that they play in decision making and guiding the work within communities. All right, so now we have our elders tribunal. And so this is a subset of the elders council, which is a standing body. So a standing body means it's not just permanently for specific elders. It means that those elders rotate depending on the dispute that comes through to the elders tribunal. So the elders tribunal in our system replaces the current court system. In dispute resolution within our system, there's a lot that is different within our system than a classic court system, which we will go into depth more in, as you can see, section 12.2.2, where we talk about dispute resolution in more depth.
So the next definition is family. The law defines family as beyond blood. So family could mean, people within the community that you identify as family through marriage. That is your family, in addition to, of course, aunts, uncles, grandparents, siblings, etc.
Yeah, and also people who have just significant emotional connections. That was really emphasized within our community engagement sessions within the urban guest community, is that family isn't always blood.
So the family head is a role that's identified within a child plan, is a person from the family that is not the parents, who has the ability to bring the family together, to sort of facilitate those family meetings, and is as the person that can speak as the authority on behalf of the family.
And we see that this role exists naturally within community, which is why it's been written into the law, is that community members have consistently expressed that, their family head has that really big role in doing this work just naturally within community. All right, so our next definition is family meeting, which is just a super central piece to our law and service system. We understand that communities and families in communities already, like when significant things happen, they arrange family meetings. And so we think about the family meetings that are called when a family is preparing for a memorial, or when someone is passed, or when there's an issue that a family needs to deal with, or they're planning for a ceremony. So these family meetings already take place, and really this law is trying to uphold that process, and really allow that process to lead planning in relation to children and families. And so in some places in our law, this like family meetings will have to be held, especially in relation to issues pertaining to child safety. But also there's pieces just to support family meeting processes. Like that is what foundationally our law is trying to do, is support those natural systems. And now for our definition of a floor manager, we've brought in Rami Paul, who's one of our team members, who's our financial lead, who is also from Sartlip, who's going to explain a little bit about it.
A floor manager culturally is someone that assists a family in the steps that they're doing in ceremony. So essentially making sure that everything is followed that needs to be done through the work.
Yeah, and so within our law, we've kind of taken the essence of that position, as Rami described it. But in our law, the floor manager is a professional position that's responsible for coordinating and facilitating the creation of those child plans that we talked about before in our definitions, also supporting families to coordinate and facilitate family meetings if they would like, and witness and record decisions made at family meetings. It's important to note too that this floor manager role, while there will be a professional position to fill this, if families want, they can choose their own floor manager that they're comfortable with from their own family or community networks.
Okay, so the next definition is a need of intervention. So our law needed to provide parameters of what we define as a child that is in need of intervention. We will go over this more thoroughly in section 10.3.1. But what people might connect this with is section 13 of the CFCSA, which outlines child protection concerns.
Yeah, and in this law, it's essentially saying like, what is the threshold that a response needs to be taken because there's a child safety concern. All right, so now we have an Indigenous governing body. So Indigenous governing body is a term that came out of Bill C-92, which is the Act respecting First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children, youth, and families. So it's an entity authorized to act on behalf of Indigenous peoples who hold rights recognized and affirmed by Section 35 of the Constitution Act. So SIA within the South Island has been authorized to act on behalf of our 7 member nations through BCRs. So we are the Indigenous governing body for the South Island that is pushing forward this work on jurisdiction on behalf of and in support of the 7 nations, as well as the guest community on the territory.
So our next definition is Indigenous guest. Indigenous guest means any Indigenous person that resides on these territories but is not a member or connected to either of the 7 nations. We've included Indigenous guests in our law because our hopes is we will provide care over Indigenous guests on these territories.
All right, so Indigenous peoples within our law has the same meaning as Aboriginal peoples under Section 35 of the Constitution Act. So that includes First Nations, Métis, Inuit individuals. To note, this includes both status and non-status First Nations. And part of the feedback that we've gotten in our system is really to encourage self-identity of indigeneity, so that SIA as a service delivery organization, as this Indigenous governing body, doesn't become the arbitrator of indigeneity, acknowledging just the colonial harms that have occurred and the separations of people from their nations. And so that has come out. So our member nations are the Indigenous governing bodies listed who have authorized SIA to be working on their behalf within this jurisdiction process. And so currently we have 7 member nations, which are shown below. We have Shtenu, Husaikum, Huchatlip, Sauk, Esquimalt, Songhees, and Pachita. All right, so member nations territory. This is important for us to define in our law, in part because the member nation's hope is to care for all Indigenous guests within their territory. And so to say that, we also have to delineate where that territory is. From the very beginning of this work, leadership and elders and community members have shared that territory there's no word in any of the languages that captures reserve line, to know that territory is not just that limited to reserve, and really it's the land, it's the territory. And so this is the image of the territory that SIA is hoping to exercise jurisdiction over in line with the nations who are a part of the work. This isn't to indicate any of those pieces around treaty or those kind of conversations. This is just really indicating where SIA's law will apply, and the Indigenous guests who it will apply to if they're residing in any of these territories.
Okay, so we have a definition for parent within the law. We felt including parent to recognize that multiple people can be a parent to a child or youth. It could be, besides the biological mother or father, it could be an auntie, it could be a grandma, it could be through legal matters, it could be through community relational matters, but we wanted to recognize that parent can mean so many things for a child or youth.
Good morning. My traditional name is Dolpilam. I come from the Saanich Nation in Seo. My English name is Chris Jim. And we want to do the definition of a receiver. A receiver is a person that receives a person from a mass dancer and places them on a sacred blanket in order of a blessing, an ancestral name, or a sacred rite from their family.
And so in being in community and from what we've heard from community members, especially when someone is receiving a name and they have receivers, and those people are it's a role parallel to that of godparents. Like, they're expected to step in if there was anything that were to happen to the parents of that child. And so a receiver is written into our law to be that person who assumes an obligation to serve, again, as parents if the child's parents become unable to do so for any reason. As we've talked about in our definition of a child plan, that's one of the minimum things for parents to indicate on their child's child plan is who their receiver is, who they would trust as those second parents of their kid. And that's where it comes from. So, all right, so the Regional Child and Family Advocate, you heard our description of the Child and Family Advocate. So those are those nation-based positions to support the holistic wellness of nation members and community members. So the Regional Child and Family Advocate is kind of that supervisory support in regards to practice for those positions, those positions also will have a nation-based supervisor relationship as well. But the Regional Child and Family Advocate is really responsible for that overall practice oversight within the South Island, and they receive their direction and guidance from the Representative Council, which Sarah just described. So they sit on that council as a non-voting member, but in a similar way of how an executive director sits on a board. The Representative Council are the ones directing the Regional Child and Family Advocate.
So the Representative Council is made up of appointed members from the 7 nations and includes 3 seats for members that represent the Indigenous guests. The purpose of the Representative Council is to provide practice oversight to the services and programs that SIA supports. We'll go more into about the Representative Council later. So we went over what the child and safety team did. So this is related to that team. The safety assessment is a written summary that is done to determine if a child is in need of intervention or not. This assessment is provided to the child and family advocate and the family. Yeah.
All right, so a safety plan is very much connected to what Sarah just shared about the safety assessment. So the child safety team comes in, does the assessment. That assessment is then given to the family head, the parents, and the CFA. And then it is the family's responsibility there are supports around to make it happen, but to come together and to address the risks outlined within the safety assessment. And so the safety plan, which we're talking about here, is how that family is addressing those risks. And what's something beautiful and about this process in that it's trying to be so family driven and family led is it's not a social worker telling the family how to do it. However, to ensure that those risks are being addressed, the CFA will have to sign off on it to essentially say, okay, this was the risk and this is how you are addressing it. And within each of these safety plans, and we'll talk about the role a little bit later, there is the requirement that witnesses are present to really be able to hold the family and those supports gathered accountable to the decisions that were made within this plan. All right, so SIA, you can see our big poster behind there, South Island Indigenous Authority. So we are the entity authorized to act on behalf of the member nations. We're the Indigenous governing body, which is that definition that you heard before. Something to note too about our name is that it's currently up for, it's getting changed likely to have something that's more reflective of the work that SIA will be moving forward in. And so hopefully a name in the language, but that is still being discussed and debated. So, all right, so within SIA's governance structure, as we've already talked about, we have the representative council that looks at and oversees practice within the region. And then we also have an expert board of directors, which an expert board means that board members are selected based on their skill set and expertise that they can bring into the board. And so that might be in Indigenous law, financial management, Indigenous governance, law, et cetera, et cetera. And so the SIA director, or the directors, are the people who sit on that expert board. And these are people who are appointed by the representative council, which again, we talked about before. And really their purpose within this system is to supervise just that management of business affairs of SIA. So administrative oversight, and they give direction to SIA's executive officer.
Hey, good morning again. It's Chris here again. I just wanted to do the definition of a speaker. And a speaker is someone who speaks for your family and work.
Mm-hmm. And so in our law, we have actually written in this role of a speaker insofar as like families, if they would like, as part of their family meeting process and formalizing that, can hire a speaker to formalize that and share their feelings. All right, and now here to explain the definition of a witness is our team member, Rami Paul, who's our financial lead for SIA and also from the Sartlib Nation. So Rami, what is a witness?
Well, I think a witness is someone who is culturally asked to oversee ceremony and be able to recall what has happened if called upon in the future. And so I think in the role that we're asking to do within our current work is to witness the work and to ensure that plans that are made are followed through, and to back up those that are implementing a plan to make sure that they can be called upon to verify how our planning steps are going to go.
Yeah.
Okay, so within the law, a young adult is identified as somebody who is between the ages of 19 and 27. They're either a registered member of one of the member nations, or they're considered connected to a member nation, whether through relational or through marriage, etc., or they are an Indigenous guest. We define young adult within our law just to provide a scope of post-majority services that SIA will be supporting. Okay, so within the law, we provide the definition of what a youth is. A youth means a child who is between the ages of 12 and 19. Within the law, there will be certain things that apply to youth, so it's felt really important to define them.
So something that we've heard from our communities is talking about the importance of youth voice, especially in matters affecting them, about them. And so with that direction, we've established a youth council within our law. So the youth council is made up of members who will be appointed from their nations or the Indigenous guest community, who will work as an advisory body within the larger SIA structure. And we're still kind of fleshing out jobs and roles and responsibilities for that, but just knowing that it's something really important to our communities.
Okay, so we just want to say thank you everyone for taking the time to watch our video. We hope this helped you with your understanding of the law and what the work that SIA is doing. So Heichka, CM, thank you very much.
And if you have any questions, you can reach out at info@sia.ca. All of this information is also on our website. We have social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Really reach out to us anywhere if you have any questions or feedbacks or comments, because all of these, it's the voices of community members that have really got us to where we are today and the stage that we're at today. And stay tuned for more videos with me and Sarah explaining the law.
Bye.